This is Trend Following Radio, where great thinking comes alive. Nobel Prize winners, legendary traders, best-selling authors, and the pros that know what drive us irrational human beings. I am your host, Michael Covel. Not filtered, raw, honest. That's my passion. Come on. You're thinking something dangerous, something risky. Give me a tire iron, a bike, and a highway in Nevada. That's what that song feels like. It just feels like risk. But what the hell is risk? Everyone talks about risky this or risky that. Some people think they have a perfect algorithm for risk. Life is uncertain. And if life is uncertain, there's no perfect algorithm for risk. There are only guesses. You might get close in the guess. You might be far away. But here's the key. You've got limited capital. And if you have limited capital, when you bet, you can be at the poker table, you can be at the stock market table, you could be at the real estate table. You could be at a table, as I just mentioned, Vegas. You could be at something even seedier in Vegas, enjoying something that I have no experience in. But risk is putting your money down and knowing damn well you could lose it. Once you put the money down, you could lose it all. Every last bit of it. This is why in the trend following world, you don't bet 10% per trade. You keep it small. You could very easily have 10 trades in a row that go against you. So you can find these folks on Twitter and their big bets. You bet 10% per trade and 10 straight go against you. Game over. Head on home. There ain't no more money, honey. And that's what risk is. Risk is loss. How much can you afford to lose? It's the only damn thing you can control. You cannot control where XYZ stock, XYZ future, XY CFD, XY derivative, XY currency. You can't control where those are going to go. You have no earthly idea. The person that tells you they know where a market is going to go is a con artist, a liar, a snake, someone who is simply looking for a way to get into your wallet, either slowly or fast. The prediction of where any market can go. That's the blinking red light. That's the signal. You're being told right there that the person in front of you with the prediction is either a fool or a con artist. There's no other choice. And who the hell wants to bet off that? Mentally deranged people locked up in straitjackets? That's about all I can see. But of course, we all know that quite a few more people, very nice people, mom and pops, take risks and don't even think about it. They don't quantify their risk. They don't say to themselves, I'm going to limit a particular trade to 2% of my net worth or 1% of my net worth. They just roll all in and put all the chips down. And shit, if they're lucky, hopefully they won't lose a life savings on one roll of the dice. My first indoctrination into risk came in a book from the 1990s, Against the Gods, The Remarkable Story of Risk. Peter Bernstein, no longer with us. If you've not read it, go find it, buy it. Smart move. It will wake you up. And through the magic of the internet, Peter is not exactly dead, at least not for my podcast, because I found a small excerpt to give you some insight into how one of those pioneers, one of those early birds, saw that risk problem.
Well, when you think about risk, I mean, we use the word so loosely. It essentially says we don't know what's going to happen. Elroy Dimpson at Harvard Business School put it, risk means more things can happen than will happen. And that's a fancy way of saying the same thing. It's a range of outcomes, and we don't know where it's going to fall within that range. Often we don't even know what the range is. Essentially, risk means we don't know what's going to happen, which is an interesting thought when you really sit and look at it. First of all, it means that good things can happen as well as bad things. Our instinct says risk means we're in danger, but it doesn't. It just means we're in the unknown and there's uncertainty. I believe with a passion this statement that we don't know what the future holds. Easy to say. A lot of people, I mean, they give it lip service or they shake their heads yes, but they go on acting as though they do know. And I think this is such a big, overwhelming idea about life that we walk every moment into the unknown. No, I don't think you should shave it down into something that this has to be in your head and in your gut all the time. When things happen differently from the way we expect or the way we anticipate or the way we planned, that doesn't mean you're a fool. That's in the nature of life. If you don't know what's going to happen, you don't know what's going to happen. Mistakes are an inevitable part of the process. And what risk management really means, things are going to be different from what we expect from time to time, and how well prepared are we to deal with when it's different.
Here's some more from Peter on risk.
Starting in the post-war years after World War II, maybe as a consequence of this enormous shock of World War II, people began to think in more sophisticated fashion about risk. It's something more than probability. The most important development, and recognized with Nobel Prizes, is Arrow de Breu, that you can begin to think about risk as kind of a set of scenarios that if you tried to put some kind of a handle on the different outcomes that might happen with the recognition that you never get 100% of it, you begin to think in a more systematic fashion. But just the sense of the normal curve, too, the distributions and where events might fall and what the structure of the distribution is, gives you a big leg up on dealing with, if you're wrong, how wrong are you going to be and what the consequences are. The second is a very simple one, but it's now pervasive. Harry Markowitz, who won one of the first Nobel Prizes in finance, in 1952, he didn't know anything about finance, but he thought he'd like to use that as a framework for thinking about trade-offs. How do you measure trade-offs? He said, in investing, you have to think about risk as well as return. To me, this is a thunderbolt of a statement. The Markowitz idea was very slow. First of all, people in Wall Street didn't like to be told this. People in Wall Street didn't like mathematical models. I forgot that it was referred to as baloney, this stuff. People in Wall Street don't like to think about equilibrium or efficiency because they believe they know so much that it's easy to beat the market. So that the intellectual acceptance was, it was repulsion rather than acceptance. But after the experience of the 1970s, where kind of everybody turned out to be wrong, from the President of the United States and the head of the Federal Reserve System on down, there was much more humility. And I think it's only in very recent years, at least in finance, that things have become more formalized than they were and less seat of the pants than they had been. Resistance to thinking about risk in a more systematic manner will diminish. I just think it's in the nature of the process. Sometimes these things are helped by a crisis or by bad news. So the 1970s certainly changed everybody's attitude in the financial markets. Everybody was wrong, or 99% of people were wrong.
99% wrong. I don't know if Peter was well aware or aware at all of trend following traders. But not everybody in the 1970s got killed. Trend following traders made a bloody fortune.
I've been fascinated with why was probability developed in the 1640s. I mean, there'd been the Greeks, great mathematicians, and the Muslims, great mathematicians. Nobody thought about probability until the 1640s. And then it set the world on fire. By the 1640s, people were beginning to understand that human beings could control their outcomes, that it wasn't all mumbo-jumbo, and that although God was up there, that we had some degree of free will. Then people began to be, well, if I have free will, how do I exercise this? And I think the explosion in financial instruments of all kinds also gives a sense of there are a lot of different opportunities that I can use, but how do I use them? How do I begin to apply them? One of the more sophisticated ways of thinking about risk is options. An option gives you the right but not the obligation to respond to a change in the scene. And so it's very helpful as a hedge. If things go against you, you can do this. If they don't, you can forget about it at a modest cost. The thing was that for a very long time, people intuitively maybe understood this gadget, but had no idea really of how to put a value on it. The development of the option pricing model in the early 1970s by Fisher Black, Byron Scholes, and Robert Merton provided a quantitative way to look at it. And so the option business exploded. And there are a few explosions that keep exploding, but this thing is just magnified. It has the quality of the Sorcerer's Apprentice, that we found an unbelievable toy, and when we begin to play with it. The big contrast between finance and the real world is that because there are ready markets in finance for practically anything, you can reverse decisions. Maybe there's a cost, but the reason you are in financial markets is because there are decisions. But there's a trade-off. If I buy shares in General Motors, I can't do anything to influence or control what General Motors does. I'm completely passive bystander. If I don't like what they do, I can sell the stock. If I'm managing a business, I can afford to make irreversible decisions because I'm in control. And the big difference, I think, that you have to keep in your head, if you're making an irreversible decision, you better have some kind of control. One of the virtues of thinking in the option framework is because it makes you define where your control begins and where it ends.
That control he talks about in the trend following world, it's a stop, baby. Stop loss, and you get the hell out. Back to Peter.
It's an interesting question why the use of optionality and thinking about these things in mathematical terms, the whole risk business in mathematical terms, moved so much faster in the financial world than in the corporate world. And I think the answer is a simple one. Think of all the data that people in finance have. You've got stock market history back to the 1870s and interest rates back to the beginning of time. So we have a tremendous amount of data to work on. And then when you begin to analyze these data and think about their relationships, the math kind of comes naturally. You test hypotheses. It's very easy to do it because you have the facts. If you're running an automobile business or a retail store, first of all, you don't have an awful lot of data. You may know something about the history of your business or one or two competitors, but you don't have this kind of easy data and going back in time easily manipulated. So thinking about risk in this kind of systematic fashion is more difficult because it's hard to test out. I mean, somebody comes to you with an idea, and you say, that sounds interesting, but what would have happened if I had done this, or somebody else had done this, or if my competitors are doing it? It's much more difficult to test the hypotheses. We tend to think that something with a small probability is not going to happen tomorrow, when it can happen at any moment. There is a large area of stuff that we don't know, and we never will know. We do our best, but there's always that gray area. And the interesting question is not how you're going to find out what that is, because you can't by definition, but how do you deal with it when it happens?
How do you deal with it when it happens? You have to know exactly how you're going to deal with it before it happens. So when it happens, you've got the plan. Again, know your risk. How much are you willing to bet? And get out when that number's hit. Boom. Back to Peter.
The idea of an option is such a powerful idea, and it took people a long time to understand all of the uses that it might have. The key thing about an option is that it's a right, not an obligation. You have an opportunity, but you don't have to take it. So at its heart, this means waiting, because we'll see what happens, then I'll decide whether I want to do it. This can influence important business decisions. I want to build a plan. I have a great idea for a new business, whatever. Do I have to do it now? Suppose I decide to wait. What is it worth to me to have the additional information that I will have with the passage of time? If I'm absolutely convinced that I have to do this now or that somebody's going to catch up to me, I'll do it now. But that means that I can't afford to wait. But suppose I think I can afford to wait. What is that worth to me? And can I do it better if I wait with more information and more opportunity to think it through? This is a big idea. Business people intuitively have done that for a long time. But this is a way using option pricing, which essentially is a function of the degree of uncertainty in the outcome. Using that to put a value on waiting, that's a stupendous idea. The kind of option that we talk about in the business world is contrasted to an option in the financial world. It's called a real option because it involves real decisions. It's my impression this is still kind of cutting-edge stuff, and a lot of people are not using this framework who could use it because it just helps you make big decisions, maybe irreversible decisions in the face of uncertainty. I mean, once the plan is under construction, you're on the hook, or the new product is being advertised, or you've cut your price. Those things have happened. It's not easy to reverse. So you want all the tools you can bring into irreversible decisions.
In terms of instrument, in terms of strategy, Peter obviously goes in a different direction than trend following. That's easy to see. That, however, does not discount his perspective on risk. Again, go read his book. Back to Peter.
There's a fellow named Rick Brookstable who's been in the risk management business for a long time who talks about the cockroach. And it's funny, but it's a very important lesson. The cockroach he uses the expression coarse risk management system, C-O-A-R-S-E. At the slightest hint of danger, he runs like hell. And this species has lasted through billions and billions of years, one of the oldest species, because at any sign of danger it runs like hell. Now you can't, in our world, you can't exist if at the first sign of danger you run like hell. But clearly there are things where a coarse decision-making process is more important than a model and something that's been tested on the data. There is a large area of stuff that we don't know, and we never will know. We do our best, but there's always that gray area. The interesting question is not how you're going to find out what that is, because you can't by definition, but how do you deal with it when it happens?
I like that. I've never heard that before. Coarse risk management. Rough. Such a good trend following descriptor. Problem appears, cut and run. Another problem appears, cut and run. Get the hell out and save your capital. Back to Peter.
Long-term capital management, which was probably the primary example of high-powered mathematical modeling of people who were geniuses in the bond market. They developed very elegant models for taking risks in the bond market. And that every kind of risk management thing that you can think of. The only thing they forgot was that all of those models were based on a world in which LTCM did not exist. Once long-term capital management came into the picture and the markets knew that these geniuses who had come from Salomon Brothers were operating there, the responses were different from what the models of the field had changed. And too much dependence on the math, you lose sight of the dynamics, you lose sight of that the world really moves and that it's a complex system.
I wish like hell I could have had the Peter Bernstein interview. And since we don't have it, and I have read it, I should go read it again, go do yourself a favor and buy Against the Gods, the remarkable story of risk. I see a time when those awake will understand how to make money in up, down, and surprise markets. Whether new trader or experienced, college student or financial advisor, protecting against a crash or just trying to make a lot of money, trend following offers everyone an answer in uncertain times. To get started immediately, send me an email, michael@covel.com. I will send you the right trend following steps to take along with my free video. But if you want to buy and hold, trust the government and trust Wall Street,
this is absolutely not for you.